guys in the dark.
I have to leave some identifying details out in this story. I was living in a very secluded place. I got a reference from a friend who was busy to babysit for this family who was vacationing nearby at a house near the ocean. House turns out to be less than a mile from the beach, with nothing but sand between us and it. There were only a couple vacationing homes, and they were all pitch black when we arrived. The dad picked me up from the house. There was no moon or street lights, so I couldn't see the ocean, but we were close enough to hear it. This would have been creepy enough all by itself. So the parents leave. We have popcorn, and then we watch some TV for an hour or so before it's bedtime. The kid is about 3 or 4. I wasn't quite sure. He didn't tell me at all. So with our current horror movie local, with this creepy thing number 2, I put him in this travel crib to sleep in and settled down in a chair in the room because I thought maybe he'd be scared to go to sleep alone in a strange place with his parents gone. Well, he proceeded to kneel in the crib and stare at me through the mesh walls of it for a solid 30 minutes. I tried coaxing him to lay down, offered to tell him a story or two. About this time, the mom calls to check in on him. I inform her that he's not falling asleep, and she says, "Oh, you have to leave him alone in there and close the door. You can leave the light on and just ignore whatever you hear. He'll tire himself out eventually." So I'm like, what the fuck? But whenever I tell him good night and leave to close the door, he'll still just fucking stare directly at me. I go to sit in the next room. This thumping noise starts slow, and then continues to get louder. So I get up to peek into the room to see what he is doing. I know the mom told me not to worry about it, but hell, I had to see what the hell was going on. I look in, and he's banging his head on the side of the crib pretty hard. But it's one of those flimsy travel cribs, more like a pack-and-play pen than anything, so he's not really going to hurt himself. But he was lifting the whole thing a few inches off the ground with the force of his head bouncing. Soon as I go to close the door, he stops, stares directly at me once again with the most blank and creepy face I've ever seen. I quickly close the door. The banging starts again and continues for another 20 to 30 minutes, and then stops. I peek in one last time, and he's fast asleep. His butt is in the air, face down on the mattress, but turned to the side so I knew that he could breathe okay. The next 3 hours of a complete silence were a bit torturous. I could not wait to leave. It's possibly he had some issues, lack of speech, and his behavior. But not to warn me at all was kind of wrong from the parents. I never sat for them again, thank God. When I was in high school, I spent about a week babysitting 2 kids in their house while their parents were away on business. Although I lived in a fairly rural area, the family lived within 10 minutes of my house. I knew the neighborhood pretty well as I had babysat for the family before. It was late October, Halloween weekend, and as a typical 17-year-old, I was disappointed that I was not out with my friends and instead stuck inside babysitting. It was just about bedtime for the kids, so it was pitch black outside and silent. The house I was sitting in had a large backyard and a sort of garage that had been converted to an apartment. A young man lived in that apartment, but the family was insistent that he never comes to the house, and he would not bother me. As I'm putting the kids to bed, the doorbell rings. Since I knew my family and friends were out for Halloween, I opened up the door without thinking about it. It was my best friend, who also lived nearby, so she knew that the house that I was staying at. She had a couple of our guy friends with her. She explained that they were on their way to the corn maze and wanted to stop by. Grateful to see them before they went, we hung out in the kitchen for probably around 20 minutes before they went on their way. By that time, the kids were asleep upstairs, so I went around the house, locked all of the doors, and closed all the blinds. It was a pretty modern-style home. An entire inside of the house was just straight windows. After I get the house ready, I settle down in the living room to watch TV. Probably around 30 minutes or so had passed when I hear a knock at the door once again. It was faint, so I turned off the TV to hear it better. Hearing the knock again, I I could feel the hairs on my arms stand up. It was pretty late, and I had no idea who would be coming to the house at this hour. Suddenly, the faint knock turns into a violent, loud banging. Running on adrenaline, I sprint upstairs to the master bedroom. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, and knowing that there was a phone in the room, I figured it would be a lot safer to be near a phone and the children. Now, not only is the door being pounded on, but the doorbell is being rung over and over again, insistently. I pound my house number into the phone. My mom picks up. I panically told her what was going on downstairs. She gives the phone to my dad. He says that he will be there. I was relieved to hear this. I clutch the phone in my hand, and I go out to the landing to check on the kids. The oldest was standing outside of her door, confused and afraid. I quickly told her that it was just my dad coming to check on us, and to go back into her room, and please go back to bed. After she goes back in her room, I rush downstairs to make sure that the doors are all still locked, running past the wall of windows to get to the door. Suddenly, all the windows start shaking violently. I'm absolutely terrified at this point, so I run to the TV room, look for something that I could use as a weapon. Suddenly, the ringing and pounding just stops. I sit there stunned, in absolute silence. Then a single doorbell ring shatters the silence and makes me practically jump out of my skin. Feeling a rush of relief upon realizing that it was my dad, I rush to open up the door. There was nobody there. I slam the door shut and run to grab the phone. I call my house once again. "Mom," I whisper, "is Dad there?" She tells me that he can't find the car keys, and he hasn't even left yet. I feel the blood run out of my face. I'm crying hysterically at this point, so my mom stays on the phone with me and tells me when my dad finally leaves. I see a pair of headlights come tearing through the dark. The sheer speed of the car told me that it definitely was my dad. I throw open the front door and I run out. Suddenly, from around the corner, 3 shadows come out. My dad, wielding a baseball bat at this point, runs towards the shadowy figures, screaming and waving his arms. The closer that they get, I realize that it was my friends. Instead of going to the corn maze, they decided that it would be fun to scare me on Halloween. I felt a rush of relief and anger. My dad bitched them out. And although I did not get a lot of sleep that night, I was happy to know that it was just my friends playing a prank. I know this story is kind of lame, but it was honestly the scariest moment of my life. I was truly afraid for my safety and the children that I was looking after. I'm just glad that it was my friends and not somebody worse. I had posted this months ago in another thread, but I'll share it again. When I was in high school, I was babysitting for 2 neighborhood kids. The little girl, Emily, never wanted to go to sleep. She would come up with any excuse to not have to go to bed every single weekend. She tried to stay up later and later. So when she got up and told me that she was scared to go back to bed, that she kept on hearing voices, I just wrote it off as her trying to get out of going to bed. I had put her and her brother Justin to bed an hour ago, and the boy was already asleep. I humored her, and I decided to go into her room, and I listened. I didn't hear a single thing. I checked out her window, everything, and heard and saw nothing. So I compromised with her. I laid in her bed with her until she had fallen asleep. After she fell asleep, I went in the hall, and then I heard voices. I felt all the blood rush out of me, and all I could think about was Emily coming into the living room an hour ago crying that she was scared, that she had heard voices begging me to believe her. And the voices were coming from inside the house. More specifically, down the hall where Justin was. I went over to the room and I knocked. I don't know why I knocked, but I think I was just so scared that I didn't know what else to do. The voices had stopped instantly. I heard Justin. It sounded like he was crying. He was around 9 years old at the time, and his parents were taking a weekend trip away. I opened up the door, and he was laying face down on the bed crying. I was sort of relieved that I figured he was just upset his parents were going to be gone so long. And I had made the whispering up in my head. So I went over to the bed, tried to ask Justin what was wrong, and he said, "They're here." The next thing I know, I hear the closet door being banged open, and I hear screams. I just threw myself on Justin. I didn't even bother with turning and seeing what was going on. I thought someone was in the house, and that they were going to kill us. So I had covered his body with mine. I was so scared that I didn't know what to do. I had already started to cry, and begging things like, "Please take anything. Don't touch the children. Please, please. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt us." Then I realized that everyone was just laughing, including Justin. I turned to see two of my friends in the room. They had thought that it would be funny to play a joke on me. And we all lived in the same neighborhood, so they got Justin in on it as well. They were just laughing and repeating everything that I was saying mockingly. I went from being terrified out of my mind to more enraged than I have ever been in my life. We eventually made up, and then it was just like this funny thing to tell people about later on. I can tell you that that was the scariest moment of my life, and I definitely am glad that it was just a prank and not an actual intruder. While in my last year at university, I was trying to earn a little extra credit money and decided to post ads online for babysitting and dog walking services in my local area. Most people with ads on there had put a picture of themselves, and so did I. Logic being that parents would want to check out potential babysitters by appearance too. Most people put contact numbers on there too, so I also had done that, thinking that it might give potential customers more points of contact than just messaging through the ad site. So within about 45 minutes of posting this ad, I'm downstairs cooking dinner. I hear my phone ringing in the bedroom, but I'm tied up with hot pans on the stove. So I left it, annoyed that I had missed a potential customer. However, I do hear the phone ring once again, and again, and again. I dash up as soon as I free myself from cooking and go and pick up the phone. When I pick up, all I hear is heavy breathing. So naturally after that, I don't get a reply, I just hang up. The phone rings again as soon as I put it down. I pick it up again, and eventually a guy replies. The guy starts off normal. I figured that perhaps he had just had a bad line before. He first explains that he has 2 kids under 5, and then asks me if I think I can handle them. Having experience with some pretty shitty behaved kids in the past, I tell him yes. He then asks me if I stay overnight when babysitting. This had pulled up a red flag in my mind. I firmly told him no. After this, he then goes silent again, and all I hear is some heavy breathing. I ask if he is still there, and then suddenly he says, "Are you a virgin?" I hang up on him. The phone keeps ringing and ringing and ringing for another hour non-stop. He had withheld his number, so I couldn't specifically block that number. But then I found the function to block withheld numbers on my phone. Did that, deleted my number from the ad site, and then I proceeded to message every other person on there in my local area with a babysitting ad to warn them. It turns out that some of them had similar experiences to what I had. It all started with hearing crying noises coming from the outside. Actually, kind of sounded like a baby crying, but the one that I was babysitting was sound asleep. I went outside to investigate, but I didn't see anything. When I closed the door, there was blood on the floor behind me, leading all the way through the kitchen and up the stairs. I didn't want to act scared or anything in front of one of the other little kids that I was babysitting, so I just tried to act cool. Kept saying, "It's all right. It's probably nothing," while in my head I was screaming, "What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck?" I went upstairs, anyway, by myself to investigate. The blood stopped and was smeared on the bathroom door. Properly shitting myself at this point. Opened it up and saw a cat bleeding from its face, hiding in the bathtub. Turned out it just got into a fight with another cat, and it must have ran in when I opened up the door to go check outside. The noises were just those weird noises that cats make when confronting each other. Parents also didn't mention that they had a cat, so that didn't help me much either. Only thing that confused me, though, was the blood on the bathroom door. It was pretty high up. Not really sure how the cat could have gotten up there. Needless to say, though, opening up that door was one of the most tense moments of my life. Felt like I was in a horror movie.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.